All right, welcome everybody. Hopefully we're live. Let us know in the comments if you can hear me okay, or if we've been having a few technical issues. So if you can't hear one of us or anything like that, just let us know in the comments and we'll try to fix it.
Buy a Get Your Guide gift card at getyourguide.com/gift.
It just went live.
The comments and we'll try to fix it.
Buy a Get Your.
There we go.
There we go. Speaking of technical difficulties,
we always got to have something.
Yeah, just to keep it fresh. Well, welcome everybody. What was that, Peter?
How many people are you expecting? You have any idea?
No idea. It's usually, I mean, not a ton, but hopefully it'll be a decent sized crowd. So, well, welcome everybody. This is a special live video we're doing here. Hopefully most of you have seen Michelle's part 1 and part 2 videos, because I think a lot of this will be related to that. So before we start, we will try to do a live a Q&A session if you guys have any questions for Peter, for Michele, Kelsey, any questions at all, obviously, hopefully related to the World Mission Society. Hold on to those for now, and we'll try to get to some of those later. I just wanted to mention before we start that if you haven't heard already, I did just create a new YouTube channel called Answering the WMSCOG. If you haven't heard of that yet, it would be great if you would go subscribe to the channel. Kind of the purpose of that is this whole sort of thing we're doing on this channel with focusing on the WMSCOG content has kind of grown to where I feel like it kind of deserves its own platform at this point. I want moving forward in the future, I'm hoping that Great Light Studios can be more of a general covering of not just focus on one specific group, but obviously we've started talking a little bit about the SCJ, and I'd like to kind of cover different cult groups, do more of a variety. And so I want to be able to put out, I think the WMSCOG, there's still so much content that needs to be made. I want to continue to be putting stuff out. And so part of the reason for making a new YouTube channel is just so that I'm not flooding the Great Light Studios channel with always, WMSCOG content. And now I'll have a lot more freedom to, I'm hoping that a new channel will mean more content. And so, yeah, so I'd appreciate if you would go subscribe if you haven't already. And so, Michele, would you maybe just quickly introduce our special guest?
Hi, everybody. So this is Peter Skolnik. He's my attorney. He's been representing me for a couple of years now. He was involved in the NXIVM lawsuits, if you guys are familiar. And that civil suit led to the federal charges against Keith Raniere, who was the head of that cult. And I believe he was already incarcerated, right, Peter?
He's incarcerated now.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah, for 120 years.
Yeah, so that led to that. So he has a lot of experience dealing with cults in court and stuff like that. So happy to have him. Thanks, Peter, for doing this.
As I say, I'm happy to be here.
So you've dealt with other cults then. What are some of the other ones that you've had experience with?
Well, the numbers are racking up. I first became involved with cults or cult-like organizations when Rick Ross asked me to represent him in a lawsuit brought by Landmark, the successor in interest to Werner Erhardt's Est. And then I represented Rick with in the whole NXIVM thing. Rick was sued by NXIVM for 20 different things, and that litigation went on for literally 11 years. And I proudly wore the label of NXIVM's enemy number one. I suspect that now that Ranieri is in jail. He probably has other bigger enemies, but and I then represented a woman who got involved with an upstate New York cult, which goes by different names. One of them is School, and none of the names are terribly descriptive, but it was a pretty invasive cult. Not so much dangerous as NXIVM was, but certainly one that controlled lives in ugly ways. And I think there was probably one or two others that I'm forgetting before I first became involved in WMS. I know that you all tend to say WMSCOG. It's too many letters for me. I just call them WMS. I first became involved with them, not for Michele, but for
Raymond.
Raymond. It's been a long day. For Raymond Gonzalez. And this was during the period when both Raymond and Michele had lost their prior attorney on what in retrospect was an absurd conflict of interest charge. And both of them were operating pro bono or pro se. And for one way or another, Raymond got to me first. So I began representing him, which for quite a while meant that I couldn't represent Michele because that might have led to the same kind of conflict of interest situation that had gotten them into the stew of not having a lawyer to begin with. But after, I don't know, a year or more, once I began to have a more comprehensive view of what the WMS was all about, and had managed to also educate the at that time 2 judges who were overseeing the cases what it was about. I asked the court for permission to be able to represent Michele as well, and happily they said, yeah, that's fine. They were not going to pull the representation on a conflict of interest charge. So that goes back now, I don't know, I guess about 2.5, 3 years, something like that. And of course, now the most recent turn of events in the litigation for Michele is that they have now, in a slightly different way, but to the same effect, tried to get me disqualified on the grounds that I have a different kind of conflict of interest between Michele and Raymond. And fortunately, the one judge who remains on the case, there's only one remaining because the other judge, for a while, we had 2 judges sitting up on the bench. It was a very strange but wonderful thing, particularly because both of those judges, I think it's fair to say, loved our case. One of them was elevated up into the intermediate level courts in New Jersey. So the one who remained at the trial level stayed as our judge. And when the WMS tried to get me disqualified, she very quickly told them that there was absolutely no basis for their claim. And of course, given that they are the WMS, they appealed. So that appeal now is pending in the intermediate court. It would be lovely if the first judge who was on our case ended up on the panel deciding the appeal, but I think that's probably verboten in terms of the way the courts assign judges to panels. But we're waiting on that. And look, one of the realities with appeals, just like jury trials, is you never really can tell with certainty what's going to happen at the end of the day. But I remain pretty confident that the appellate division will tell WMS to go away just like the trial judge did. And then I will first be in the position of coming up of being able to pursue. Right now, the judge has put a hold on everything. There's a freeze until the appeal is decided. But one of the things that we have in the bag is that we have a much stronger case to disqualify WMS's attorneys than they have to disqualify me. And I can't bring that claim now because of this hold. But as soon as the appellate division, I say as soon, I'm going to knock some wood. Once the appellate division throws this appeal out, the next move in the litigation here will be to get both sets of lawyers who are representing WMS disqualified. And if that happens, I think this whole mess settles pretty quickly. But, you know, a boy can dream. That's where we are.
Okay. So you mentioned coming to have a comprehensive view, more or less, of the WMS. Well, I'll start calling them that. I'm the one who kind of has the bad habit of spelling out the whole thing.
I'll forgive you.
But so I'm really curious to hear a little bit about that. Like, what, you know, from your perspective, you have kind of a unique perspective on all of this. And so I'm just curious, I mean, after having dealt with other cults, what kind of is that comprehensive view that you've come to have? When you look at the WMSCOG, you see how they operate, you see their behaviors, their tactics. What's kind of your overall perception of them?
Well, you know, I guess there are three things that sort of have figured into the overall. I mean, you know, there are a lot of documents in this case, and part of my becoming you know, more familiar with the whole situation was going through these piles and piles of documents. So a general knowledge that the documents bear up to show that Michele's case has a great deal of merit is one part of this. The related piece is that when I first started to represent Raymond, he was under one of their non-disclosure agreements that literally prohibited him from talking to me. And one of the first things that we had to do, although it took a while to wend this thing through the procedural stages, was to file a motion to get them to get the court to throw out the NDA. The first thing I had to do en route to that was getting permission for Raymond to even talk to me. And once he was able to talk to his lawyer, that allowed me to get a better handle on the documents that he held, which was quite a treasure trove. And eventually that led to the ability to get their ridiculously overbroad NDA thrown out. So, you know, it was familiarity with the documents, getting in a position where I could actually talk to my clients, certainly getting into the position where I could represent both Raymond and Michele. And frankly, the fact that, you know, as of, I don't know, I guess it's almost going back a year and a half, Michele managed to gather a group of you folks who would back up a lot of the knowledge that I had gotten about the church from her. When I say back it up, it's not as if I ever had any doubt about it, but in bringing a lawsuit, it's always better to have various witnesses, all of whom are going to be singing from the same prayer book about what it is that this cult does. So, you know, I have to thank all of you, or the several of you who have agreed to become witnesses in this thing, to bolster the case that we are anticipating being able to bring to trial once all of the very large piles of dust get cleared away here. So, you know, but it always struck me that the things that Michele was reporting online and certainly talking to me about what what the inner workings of WMS are, what they had done to her and to her marriage, knowing from Raymond, who had a very different elevated view as a senior member of the church until he saw the light and left, knowing a lot about the way the hierarchy of the church operates and controls things. All of that was eye-opening and put me in a position where at this point, once this thing is ready to go to trial, if it doesn't settle before then, I think we're going to be in enormously strong position. And I think it's fair to say that as the litigation has proceeded and various motions have come before the judges, you could count on the fingers of one hand how many times the church has won those motions, whereas you need both hands and both feet to count the number of times that we've won. So I think they enjoy being kicked, but hopefully I will soon be able to relieve them of the obligation of filing motions that they're going to lose on by getting them disqualified. But that's where we are.
Okay. So I think it was probably a couple years ago now. I think it's maybe in the middle of the pandemic, but you joined, actually it's about this same group here. Jordan Young hosted the live video that you were a part of discussing the subpoenas when they were trying to get the Zoom calls and things like that. I just listened through that conversation again yesterday, and you were predicting that would come to nothing. I never, I think that was about the last I heard of it, was that Zoom call, and then I haven't heard a thing about it since. So what kind of played out in that situation?
Well, the reality is that it hasn't played out. It hasn't played out because despite various periods over the last 18 months or so where WMS could have renewed their request to depose the several witnesses that have been named, they didn't do that. They never said that they were not going to. And, from the perspective of a lawyer, that it would be insane for them not to, because I'm planning to bring all of the folks who received those subpoenas to trial, hopefully on a remote kind of a hookup rather than anybody having to come to New Jersey. But they will be, as lawyers, sort of obligated to depose those people. And as I say, they had various opportunities when they could have. Now that there's this freeze in place, they couldn't pursue it. But for those of you who received those subpoenas and with whom I spoke either on that Zoom call or in separate phone conversations, don't assume that this thing is over for you. It really is very unlikely that it is over. Of all of the witnesses that we had named, they took one deposition. They deposed the mother of one of the women who remains inside the church, basically on the grounds of the way the church has broken that family apart. But they have not pursued the others yet. But as I say, I expect that if these lawyers remain in place, they will.
So what would that look like?
What it would look like would be a series over, a month or two of depositions. As I say, hopefully on a Zoom or Zoom-like platform for them to be able to depose those of you who received subpoenas. As I had predicted, or as I had told you to anticipate at the time, before your depositions, I would spend a little bit of time preparing each of you for how to answer questions during a deposition. And during a deposition, once WMS's lawyers get through questioning you, I can also question you. And, it's one of those things where it's unlikely that the church is going to ask questions that where they can almost predict that the answers are going to bite them in the ass. I could ask those same questions, but there's a strategic question of whether I ask them in the deposition or I save them for trial, where it's, pretty effective for them to be bitten in the ass in front of the jury rather than simply on a Zoom call. But that's what that's going to look like. It'll be a series of depositions over a period of a couple of months, yet to be coordinated with the church.
Okay. So this a comment that we got a minute ago, I thought we could maybe all look at for a minute. I think this is a great point. So I don't know how to say that name. Peronist, we'll go with that. Says NDA should be an instant red flag for current members. Religious organizations must be more transparent. So yeah, I mean, considering everything that's going on here, I mean, this situation that is even calling for a live video like this. I mean, what does that? I don't know. I don't have a specific question. I guess I just want to hear your guys' thoughts on that. I mean, a church that, for whatever reason, feels the need to try to get its members to sign non-disclosure agreements, that when critics speak up, whether former members or not, online. I mean, what does that? Obviously, this is something we've talked about before, but how does that kind of strike you guys as you kind of stop and consider that this coming from a church, coming from a religious organization that claims to be, having the one true church of God, the ones that have the truth of the Bible figured out. How does that strike you guys? Anybody feel free to chime in.
Well, I can speak from just a general member perspective. So I do want to say that I don't think it was every church that was asked to sign, or where members were asked to sign NDAs. I think it was select locations, obviously one of them being the East Coast branches. But because I was in the church for 10 years and I was never asked to sign an NDA. Had I been asked, I can tell you that I definitely would have signed it without a lawyer present, and I wouldn't have thought twice. Because I mean, your mindset when you're there and they tell you to do something, you just automatically do it because all your trust is in them. And so, if I had been asked to sign one, I would have signed immediately. I would have signed it and not even thought twice about it. I don't know what other churches other churches other than the WMS. I don't know if a standard church has NDAs, but I will say that, if the WMS is the true church and they have nothing to hide, why would they need members to sign NDAs? That would be my question. So
let me just say a quick word about NDAs. NDA is a broad term, and there are NDAs and there are NDAs. I find it pretty hard to conjure up in my mind an NDA that a church would issue, any sort of an NDA that a church could issue that would not seem to be a red flag to one degree or another. But the fact is that the NDA that we had to fight on behalf of Raymond said, in effect, you as a member cannot say anything about the church to anyone forever. It could not be any more broad. You cannot mention the church to anybody for the rest of your life. So, talk about transparency. That's a concrete wall surrounded by a lead wall surrounded by a moat. You can't get more do not disclose than that. But as I say, even if you water that down a little bit, as Kelsey just said, it's when you're in the grips of a cult like WMS, it is very likely that something is put in front of you and you sign it. And you don't think about whether or not it is right. You trust the people who are asking you to do it. You don't think that you need a lawyer. That's certainly what happened with Raymond. I mean, he signed his NDA, and fortunately, within a year of signing it, he recognized what a crock the whole church was. And then we first had a fight to get the NDA released. But NDAs by churches, they seem to be oil and water. As Kelsey said, I can't imagine why a church, or I guess it was the person who asked the question said, transparency does seem to be the order of the day for a church that has nothing to hide and thinks that it has some truth. If a church has the truth, why wouldn't they want everybody to know their truth openly and to spread their truth? But to spread their truth not in a way where, well, come into the back room here, we'll tell you our truth, but now you can't say anything to anybody, which is in effect what WMS did. You would get dragged from a college campus drag. You would be seduced from a place like a college campus. You would be baptized before you could say, my name is John Smith. And once you were baptized, you would immediately start getting indoctrinated. And part of that indoctrination built up very quickly to a kind of mental control where they would tell you, well, now you shouldn't really be talking to anybody who isn't in the church because they're all Satan and they're going to lead you down the wrong path. So just stick with us. It's just a preposterous way for an organization that claims to be religious and honorable and God-fearing and all the rest of what it is that most churches are. It boggles the mind, which is why I have found it both fascinating and life affirming to be fighting the WMS for as long as I have.
Mm-hmm. That's Michelle. Sorry, I looked like you wanted to say something. I don't.
Yeah. So, Peter, you won't probably know about this, but back when the cases first started, there was an agreement they had me sign once when they gave me my first copy of the sermon book. And they said, well, this is just saying that, if you, for whatever reason, you leave, you're going to give us the book back and you're not going to use it for, what you're not supposed to use it for, something generalized like that. So, they're like, here's the book, and just like sign for it kind of thing. Right. So, yeah, of course I signed it. I was never given a copy. And like at the end of the agreement, there was a paragraph that basically was like an NDA sort of thrown in there, like a separate clause. And I think it was like a year or two after they sued me that they were like, aha, look what we have. She violated this agreement that they had completely forgotten that I signed, and I had forgotten also. And the judge found that ridiculous. She said the fact that you didn't even remember that, you had this document in your possession proves that you didn't actually think that it was enforceable or that you plan to pursue anything. And also, you can't call it like something agreement about the sermon book and then have like a paragraph at the bottom that's about something completely different. So the judge ruled that, she threw that out really early on in the case. But just to make the point that they'll try to sneak it in there somehow. So as members, you got to kind of be careful and read everything that you're asked to sign. But yeah.
Well, Michele, you said that you think I may not know about this. I mean, I'll admit that my memory is not nearly as good as yours about all of this stuff. And as I get older, my memory about most things is not as good as many people's. But that one I do remember.
Okay.
I remember all the details of the fact that you signed it and how they tried to pull it out of a hat and how the judge said, no, guys.
Yeah.
Wow. This is a misleading use of that NDA.
Right.
So it's mind-boggling, like you said, that they try to have their members sign NDAs in the first place. But then, Michele, what you're saying here just takes it to a whole other level, because it's not only that they're trying to get members to sign NDAs, but they're sticking it into these documents that have, seemingly nothing to do with that. And so they're trying, like you said, trying to not only get members to sign NDAs, but they're trying to sneak it in. It's just so much deception and coercive tactics that is just, I think, Peter, you said it right when you just said mind-boggling. It's like, what else can you say about it? It's just, it's something else.
I mean, the document that says here, we're gonna give you a sermon book or something like that, and you have to promise that if you leave, you will return it. That's almost not an NDA. That's really a loan agreement. It's saying we're going to loan you something, but we just want you to know that it's only on loan. You can't keep this. You have to give it back. That's not nearly as suspicious as and never speak of this again.
Yeah.
Right.
And so you kind of mentioned a few minutes ago, Peter, that seeing this group, seeing how they operate, and kind of just seeing what this group is, I guess, gives you sort of a sense of, well, I don't know what you call it, but just it makes you feel good about the fact that you're fighting against them. So maybe talk a lot about that a little bit more. I mean, because that's something that is again, you have an interesting perspective on this. So has that kind of been a motivator to take this case and to want to really do everything you can to fight these guys?
I guess, look, the simple answer to that is yes, it has been a big motivator, and it has made me as impassioned about this case as one can get. So much so that, my wife periodically says, "Peter, don't take any more of these cult cases. They just drive you into the ground." But yes, I mean, I guess as I get on in years, I like to think that I'm building up something of a reservoir of the good deeds, or as the Jewish faith calls it, a mitzvah, and all of the work that I do in fighting the WMS is coming out to be a very large mitzvah that, win, lose, or draw, at least I'll be proud of having fought what I consider to be the very good fight and the important fight here.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, definitely. What are you guys hoping is going to be accomplished? I'm just wondering, looking into the future, do you foresee the possibility that, these proceedings could lead to the WMSCOG maybe backing off from how they sort of misuse and abuse the legal system to attack critics and former members? Do you think that the way this all plays out could contribute to that? I mean, do you think there's any, I guess, is there hope that could happen? Is there hope that how this all could play out could lead to the WMSCOG getting to where they say, okay, us going to the courts has not worked out. Let's stop that. Maybe try something else. I mean, is there, from where you're sitting, do you see that there's even a legitimate hope of something like that happening?
Look, certainly there's a hope. One of the imponderables here is the degree to which there is ultimately wisdom at the top of WMS COG. Supposedly God is at the top, so that should be enough wisdom for them to recognize, oh, that didn't work out so well. but it's like predicting a political race.
Yep.
You never know. You never know how the voters are going to vote until they vote. But certainly, one likes to think that if they lose badly here, it will give them some second thoughts about suing other critics. Although they might be cynical enough to think, well, okay, so we lost that one, but we can sue this person because they're not going to know what happened to the first case, or we'll try to find a way to make it seem like, oh, this is completely different. That had nothing to do with, I don't know.
Yeah.
The law in that regard can be a strange beast.
Yeah.
When a ruling in one case will really have a definitive legal effect in the next case, there are, as in many things in the law, complex cases and rules and traditions that it's hard to predict how that plays out.
Yeah. Well, let's hope it does. Yeah, and hopefully these videos can somewhat contribute to that. If nothing else, bringing awareness and helping other people that could face similar issues in the future to see that this has happened before and there's information about it out there to learn about it. And so that's hopefully what these videos are accomplishing, if nothing else. There's been a few comments here I've seen, Kelsey, that there's some good questions passing by. I'm assuming if we skip them all now, we probably will lose them. So has anything popped up that you want to pull up real quick?
Yeah, the first one that came through is from Andy O. And this person was asking, what was the most shocking tactic that the WMS has tried in your trials?
Is that a question for me?
Yes, I suppose so. You or Michele.
Well, shocking.
I could think of one.
I guess,
shocking.
Say it again.
I said I could think of one that I remember being sort of shocking, I guess. I don't know if that's the right word, but and this would be back when they sued me in the beginning, when the judge asked them for the statements that they quoted in the complaint, and they couldn't produce them or wouldn't produce them. And the judge would say, well, but you quoted directly from somewhere to draft the complaint. Like the statements are in quotes. Where are those statements from? And they kind of danced around it and just wouldn't give the statements, and it was just really weird for me sitting there listening to this, because I'm like, you drafted the complaint from something, but they're sort of pretending that they didn't know where it came from, or that it was members who had brought the information to them, or just something very vague. When they were suing for $12 million, to me was a bit shocking. That
take our word for it.
Yeah, like you should, and they would say that. So the pleadings have to be taken on their face and all this other stuff, and you would think that in a lawsuit against someone for $12 million, that you would at least have a copy of the statement that you're alleging is defamatory, like ready to go if someone would ask. And they it was almost 2 years, I think, before we got statements from them, and we didn't get all of them, and then that kind of spilled over into the cases that we have now, because I don't know if it was inadvertently or what, but they later submitted statements that they should have given to us years ago, and they didn't. And I think that they didn't realize that the statements or the documents they gave they were proof that they had the statements in their possession when the judge continuously asked and ordered for them to produce them. And so they were ultimately sanctioned for that conduct. That was one of the motions that Peter and I put together. I think it was like 2 years ago or something. So that to me was shocking, because, why hang on to those statements? Why keep saying that you don't know and you have to get subpoenas from Yahoo and every other place that you say the statements were when you had them in your possession to begin with. So that was one of the things, but Peter might have something else.
Well, look, I don't shock easily, particularly when it comes to the question of the tactics that opposing lawyers can pull. I mean, I've seen a lot of stuff. You know, the 11 years fighting NXIVM gave me plenty of instances of sort of incredible nonsense. But, you know, it doesn't fit in the category of shocking, but I think what is probably the most important tactic that the church tried in the history of these litigations was their use of something called the church autonomy doctrine. The church autonomy doctrine is basically one that says that civil courts should not be in the business of ruling on whether or not a church's practices and beliefs are valid, are good or bad. You know, civil courts shouldn't be making judgments about church belief. And for quite a while in these litigations, the WMS had used that doctrine, I would say hidden behind that doctrine, to deny access to virtually every document that they had, which would have proven the validity of Michele's case and of Raymond's case, saying, "Well, no, these are internal church documents about the way we believe and what we think." And fortunately for them, they had one intermediate level decision out of New Jersey courts that ambiguously seemed to support their view that they could protect some of this stuff. And ultimately, I was able to restructure what it was that decision was saying and bring a new motion back to the trial court to basically say, look, the church autonomy doctrine should not be used or should not be allowed to block access to these materials, because I'm not asking you, Your Honor, to rule on whether or not what the church does or says is good or bad or right or wrong. All I'm asking you to do is to look at these documents and say, it exists. No judgment, no, you know, whether or not I agree with what the doctrine says or I disagree with it. All I'm asking you, Your Honor, to do is to recognize that this doctrine on this piece of paper exists in the church. And the court accepted that. It went up on appeal. And on appeal, this time around, the appellate division said, yeah, that's right. That's the way to look at the church autonomy doctrine. It is only when the courts have to decide good, bad, right, wrong, not exist, don't exist. So that, as I say, that the use of the church autonomy doctrine to try to keep everything under their control that would prove our case was about as problematic a litigation maneuver as I had to fight my way through, but fortunately we were able to do that. So and let me just put in a complete aside here, because when Michele was answering the question about what shocked her, she made a passing reference to a motion that she and I put together. And let me say, as I have said every time I get a chance, Michele, who is, as we all know, not a lawyer, has a better legal mind and writes better legal documents than 95% of the lawyers that I deal with. She is so good and has such a comprehensive memory and such a clear understanding of what's important and what isn't important, that when she says that she and I put stuff together, very often on some of these complex motions, I have to rely on Michele to remember that, this piece of paper exists and where it exists and when it exists and what it says. I just want to make it clear to all of you that don't think that you could survive a couple of years of representing yourself against one of these cults the way Michele did, because there aren't too many Michelles when it comes to knowing how to deal with the legal system without having spent a day in law school.
Well, I do have my former lawyer, Paul, to thank for that also, because he did teach me a lot. I was always interested in the law, and I'd considered going to law school many times in the past. And so I was always very involved in, getting the documents together and the exhibits and the arguments and all that. So I didn't know back then that was preparing me to have to represent myself years later, which was like a really, really tough time in my life. Peter, do you remember that day that we argued side by side? That was the last motion that I argued on my own behalf, pro se. It was you and I were on one side, and then the WMS lawyers were on the other. It was actually pretty cool. We met not too long before that, and we were kind of working off of one another in court without preparing together or anything like that, because he represented Raymond and I was representing myself. So it was that was the fun part of it. The rest of it was hell. Yeah.
I do remember.
Is there a recording of that one?
There is. Yeah. I can send you.
Do you have it, Michele?
I don't have it, but we can request it. Yeah, there's.
Yeah, that would be a fun one to listen to.
Yeah,
definitely. Don't let me forget, because I would really like to hear that.
Yeah.
Okay. So another question here for Peter. Chrissy says, my question for Peter is whether it's unusual or uncommon for cults to sue in this manner as WMS has sued ex-members. Also, are their tactics in court unusual?
It's a two-part question. Is it unusual for them to sue? For many cults, it is not unusual. Many cults are just litigious by nature when their view of how they attract and keep members requires them to keep a tight grip on what their members are saying. And are the tactics in court unusual? Interestingly enough, it's a general matter, the tactics are not unusual, because I often find myself referring to the cult playbook. And the truth is that many cults use sort of the same general approach to how to mount a litigation. That's when they are the plaintiffs suing members rather than defending themselves because they are being sued by members. But as a general matter, if a cult has money, and many of them have a lot of money because they're basically sapping the lifeblood out of their members, if they have a lot of money, the general tactic is to make the litigation as complicated and as drawn out and as expensive as possible, on the theory that individual members simply are not going to be able to fight them. Most individual members don't have the money to fight them themselves. And in most cases, they find it hard to find lawyers who are familiar enough with cult litigation to be willing to represent them on what's called a contingency basis, where, and when you're a defendant, there can't be a contingency only works when you're the plaintiff, when you're trying to get money from the cult. when you're a defendant, there ain't no money. There's only the possibility of losing money, and finding lawyers who are willing to defend you in that situation is not only hard, it's by and large impossible. So, a lot of this is unfortunately the way a lot of cults operate and the approach that they take. Although, I think it's fair to say that by comparison to some of the cults that I have fought, WMS is right up there with NXIVM in terms of their willingness to make it as complicated and as difficult and as expensive as possible. In the case of WMS, their money comes from an international source of funding from their members. In the case of NXIVM, to some degree, it was international. They had a very big operation in Mexico, but most of their funding came from the fact that Claire Bronfman and her sister, who are, the Seagram's heiresses and worth hundreds of millions, were funding their litigation. And Claire is now also convicted, along with Rainieri, and is now in prison somewhere in, I don't know, I think North Carolina or something. Not for 120 years like Keith, but she's in the slammer. And that's largely due to her willing participation in a lot of the egregious stuff that NXIVM did. So, as I say, the approach is wear them down, get them to shut up, or they're going to be very sorry. I'm now probably going to either piss people off or get a lot of scolding, because I'm going to sit here and have a cigarette, because one of the things I can't do when I'm in a deposition, I can't have a cigarette. And after a couple of hours of asking or answering questions, I get antsy. So I'm going to.
You are more than welcome.
Okay. And I won't bother to turn off my camera.
No, don't do. Yeah, you are just fine. So I have kind of an addition to that question, I guess, and it kind of goes along with this one too. So these people are asking, about similarities or differences between the WMS and how they operate. But I'm curious, have you ever experienced or even heard of anything similar being done by a Protestant church or organization or a Catholic church or organization? Have you ever even heard of a similar situation like that?
I think the answer is no. I can't pretend to know the habits of every Protestant or Catholic, Protestant denomination or the Catholic Church. I don't know, for example, whether or not Jehovah's Witnesses or the Mormons, whether or not there are any sort of NDAs that any of their people sign. I just don't know. I haven't heard of it. I haven't confronted it in lawsuits. And it occurs to me that you mentioned the Catholic Church, given all of the litigation or threats of litigation that they've been involved with for sexual abuse of minors by the clergy. It could be that there are NDAs that are entered into as part and parcel of settling some of those lawsuits, or the church may have, the Catholic Church may require a priest who has been accused and signs an NDA in addition to agreeing to step down from the priesthood, will sign an NDA that he won't speak about the entire subject or the fact that the church knew what he had done and let him go. I just don't know. But I haven't confronted, for example, I don't know of any NDAs that NXIVM ever used with any of its people. Its control over their minds was affected by methods other than NDAs. So.
Okay. Let's give Peter a break because we got a question for Michele here.
Good.
Let him enjoy a cigarette for a moment in peace. Michele, what advice can you give a recent former member trying to leave your cult identity in the past?
So that's a tough one. It really depends on how long you were in, whether or not you have a support system left outside of the cult anymore. Some people, having been there a long time, have cut off all of their former friends and family and feel like they don't have other people to connect with. But my advice would be to try to connect with the things that you loved to do and the people that you liked to spend time with before you were in the cult, to reconnect with your authentic self again. Like, for example, I really love to dance. And when I joined the cult, that became almost not, I rarely did it while I was there because of the time restraints and everything. And just any other hobbies that I had were put on the back burner because there wasn't any time. And of course, I spent a lot less time with my family when I was in the WMS. So when I left, having the time to reconnect with them, reconnect with old friends, and, dance again and get out and meet more people, that really helped. And of course, therapy if you need it. I did 6 months of therapy as well to help me get through everything. So yeah, it's a combination of those things, but really lean on your support system. Hopefully you have one.
Kelsey, sorry, go ahead, Peter.
No. It just occurred to me that in the course of my my work with Rick Ross on the NXIVM stuff, that also led to my spending quite a bit of time helping some people who had left NXIVM and found themselves in a position of having to defend litigation or just being angry at NXIVM. And two of them, a woman by the name of Sarah Edmondson, who was the first one who exposed the branding. And for those of you who had remembered seeing it, there was a photograph of her showing her brand that I think was on the front page of the New York Times. Sarah has now
her book cover too.
Right. Well, she now has something. She has a podcast called A Little Bit Culty, where she interviews people about their experiences. So she's sort of getting back by just going wholesale and exposing cult behavior. And Susan Dones, who lives out in Tacoma, Washington, once she left, she was sued by the church and countersued. And I was giving her advice along the way, so much so that predictably, NXIVM tried to have me disqualified there as practicing law in Oregon without a license. And I managed to convince the judge that all I was doing was giving some advice. I wasn't practicing. And he accepted that. And she won that case. So suing their asses back is sometimes a satisfying way of leaving your cult identity in the past. But as Michele said,
and like helping others too. Like for me, writing the articles and starting the website and telling my story. Of course, that's part of it. I know that's not for everyone. Some people want to move on with their lives and forget about it. But for those of you who would benefit from speaking out, definitely do it. because that way you help other people without even knowing it. Because a bunch of people reached out to me after I did the interview with Jordan a few weeks back that I hadn't heard from, that said that, you know, they had heard something about my story but had no idea how involved it is. Even some of my family members that saw the interview were like, wait, we knew you were involved in that, but we didn't know it was that bad or that serious or had been going on for that long. Like, they didn't know the extent of it. So yeah, I definitely think that the more that you speak out, if that's something that would help you, it definitely will help you move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. One way or another, just accept that your time in a cult does not have to control and define the rest of your life. And whatever the path is that you need to go down to find a way to accept that and act on it, do it, whether it's therapy or speaking out or whatever it is that works for you. But accept that you are not going to be bound by or controlled by that time forever.
Yep. Yeah. Kelsey, you are in there for 10 years too. So I would guess you might have a few thoughts on this question.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's you got to take it day by day. There's really no other way. You have to, I mean, because when you leave, it's a lot of it's like, well, what am I going to do with my time? You probably feel guilty. You probably feel scared that, you know, still having the belief of the church in your mind that you're going to go to hell. So you really just have to take it slowly, take it day by day, give yourself time. You know, like Michele said, like maybe explore things that you enjoyed before you joined the church, or talk to people that you used to talk to before you joined the church. And if you don't have those things available, then trying things, you know, that might interest you. And certainly exploring therapy if you have the means and the want to do so. And because I think one of the best ways, because when you do leave, you have so much anger. I mean, there's some days where I'm like, oh, like I can't even describe. Like I have so much anger for what they did and what they continue to do, even though I'm not there anymore. But I think one of the most powerful ways you can kind of get back at them is to live your life the way you want to live it now, because you lost so much of your life when you're in there. And so now that you have the chance, enjoy the chance, you know, now, live in the now. That's what I try to do. But also like Michele said, like, you know, certainly if you want to speak out, share your story, that's also like, that's been, for me, that's been super helpful. I feel like my whole time doing videos with you, Jordan, has been like an on-air deconstruction in a way.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
like, because when I left, I didn't leave because of the doctrine. I left because I was just, you know, so burned out. And so when I started doing videos with you, I didn't understand completely why the doctrine was incorrect. Why, you know, because I you know, I still thought like, okay, the church still is still got some good points biblically, and I would ask you the questions and you would respond and give me something else to think about. So so that certainly helped me, you know, connecting with other, not only former members of the WMS, but former members from other cults as well. Watching videos and testimonies from people who've been in cults completely different than my own, and
Mm-hmm.
seeing the similarities in the framework. Like I saw a lot of Scientology and ICOC videos when I left, which really helped me. So it's just it's not a quick process. It takes a lot of time, but it's definitely worth it in the end.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And this isn't a self plug necessarily, because there's a lot of other resources out there providing information. But I think I've seen over and over again members reaching out, talking about how helpful it has been to mainly the former member interviews, to be able to listen to other members sharing their stories. And I just think for those of you may be wondering the same thing. How can you kind of get your life back? I think that could at least be one helpful part of that is just listen to other people, listen to other people's experiences, which will help you kind of realize that you're not alone. And also, I just think it'll help you to process mentally, emotionally, things that you won't maybe necessarily be able to process as easily as you will if you're listening to other people share their story. There's just so much in those interviews, I think, that you'll be able to relate to. And so that's why I think podcasts like the Playing in Traffic podcast, obviously the work Michelle's doing on her site. And then for some of you, there's still people are different. The situations are different. So some people come out and they're really still hung up a lot by doctrinal issues. Some people just kind of drop it immediately, and that's not so much of an issue. But there's platforms out there. There's the Encountering Ahnsahnghong. I can't remember the exact website. Blogspot, but that's a site where it walks through in detail, like the specific doctrinal points, just so you can kind of just see and really connect in your mind that, wait a minute, this church really doesn't have it. They really don't have the truth. They really don't know what they're talking about. And I just think all those things can kind of contribute to you getting more and more free.
Look,
sorry.
No, I was just going to say the notion of support group certainly it comes into play here. Look, support group, people form support groups to talk about experience with disease, with physical or sexual abuse, with postpartum depression. I mean, almost every cult, no matter how large or small, if you have recently left a cult, there's a good chance that you, if you think about it, have a way of reaching out to other people who have left or who are thinking about leaving, and contacting them and suggesting that you all get together to talk about your experiences. It is creating a support group for yourself, and sharing experiences with others who have had similar experiences and have different perspectives or can bolster your perspective can be enormously helpful, I think. So that's another path to follow.
Yeah.
You don't have to start a podcast. You don't have to go sue people, but reach out to those who will be in a position to support you in your efforts to come to grips with what you've experienced.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, Kelsey, hopefully you've kept up with the comments better than I have.
That would be a no.
Okay.
Well, so I don't remember where the comment was, but I responded to it in the chat. Somebody was asking about therapists that could treat people who been in cults. Those do exist. You kind of have to dig around on Google to find them, but just want to point out that there are therapists who specialize in helping others who have left high demand religions. So
if anybody knows of specialists in that field, let me know, because I don't know why that hasn't really crossed my mind, but that's, we could start putting that information on the videos, so that that information would just be right there for those of you that might be interested in something like that, because I think that could be hugely impactful for a lot of people. So if anybody knows, if anybody has any information about therapists who specialize with cult recovery, shoot me an email or put it in the comments.
Okay.
Let me pull this one up here. So going a little bit back to what Peter was emphasizing earlier, Michelle's might have missed her true calling, but I think hopefully if you've watched those videos, I definitely just doing those interviews with Michele came to definitely a better appreciation of what she's been through. Not only that, but her willingness to stay in the fight. And I don't think it had really hit me until I sat and interviewed her. And then even, the weeks of putting that together, that, in large part, a lot of my ability to probably continue to make these videos as freely as I have for the past few years, I would say it's fair to say, at least in part, I have Michele to thank. I think it just takes people like her who are willing to make the sacrifice of staying in the fight. And so, yes, thank you, Michele. We all appreciate the work you've done on the examining site that has helped so many people and continues to.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Let's see here. You got another one, Kelsey? And
I
Peter,
did.
I don't want to keep you too long. So if at any point you need to jump off, we'd love to have you as long as you're able to be here. But I know we've passed an hour, so
I'm pretty close to my jumping off point, but I can give you a little more time here.
okay. Maybe let's see if we can pull.
I don't know if you've heard my phone clicking off every once in a while, which is basically somebody either asking for help or asking for money. They come fast and furious.
Let me see.
I'm trying to look.
There's one here from Free
Okay.
Thinker that says, once this case is settled, do you see any media coverage happening or possible criminal charges?
So I answered that one in the chat. I definitely think that there's going to be some media coverage. The Today Show did do that interview. I was a part of that. That Ronan Farrow did the interview for the Today Show. So, and I know that People Magazine had some interest in it as well. And also the local paper here in New Jersey has done some pieces on the WMS and the court cases. So I wouldn't be surprised that if we went to trial, that the media would definitely, I think they would definitely cover it.
There's another question.
I would hope so.
Part is I don't know.
We don't know the future.
Yeah, exactly.
There's another question here.
Okay.
Oh no! If you're going to go ahead.
No, I was just gonna ask if you had another question. So go ahead.
Okay, this one's a good one. And they're all good, but this one's pretty good. So Alexander Montilla asks, Michele, you've done a lot to help former members. What can other former members do to carry on that mission?
I mean, anybody who's interested in submitting like an article topic or even an article, if you want to write a draft and submit it to the examining site, you can do that through the contact form. And I really think, like Jordan said, the more former members that speak out and tell their stories, like on his channel and on the Playing in Traffic podcast, or even writing up your story to post on the examining site, that really does help, because I think that people, when they're thinking of leaving, even though members are taught not to go onto the internet, they find themselves there anyway. So whether they find their way to the examining site and start reading things, or whether it's the comment section on one of these videos, or listening to other former members' videos, that really helps people who are doubting that they can sort of listen to someone else's story when they're ready. So I think that that's really helpful, that those interviews are out there and those stories are out there, so that when current members are having doubts, they have, somewhere to go or some material to review. Because when I first left, there was almost nothing available online, and now there's so much. And I think that that's really awesome.
Yeah. And that kind of sets up what maybe could be a good last question for Peter. And then you guys in the comments, if you do have any final questions for us, we'll probably try to wrap up here soon. But as we're encouraging members to speak out, share their story, a lot of members email me, especially those who have just freshly left the group, and they really want to share their story. They really want to give their testimony, but a lot of people just have this deep-seated fear of what might happen if they do. And so I know this might not be an easy question to answer, but just to get your thoughts on what sort of risk do you think most members have? If members are wanting to speak out, whether on this channel or creating their own channels, as many others have done, do you see that there is a substantial risk for them doing something like that?
It really depends upon the cult, and the degree to which they are litigious by nature and protective of their conduct. I tend to think that the WMS is going to think twice or three times before suing any other former member who leaves and speaks out. And NXIVM happily barely exists anymore, so they're not going to sue anybody. But so I say it really depends. The Scientologists are sort of notorious for suing people who speak out against them. I think that's calmed down a little bit, but I guess about I don't know, probably goes back 10 years or so ago. The Copyright Act was changed in some fairly important ways. And I wrote an article for some sort of a lawyer newsletter pointing out that once the Copyright Act had changed, the first 5 lawsuits brought under that Copyright Act change were brought by the Scientologists against former members. I mean, it's like the Scientologists viewed this as, oh, okay, here's one that can cause us some problems, so we better start suing. So it really depends. Is there a risk? There's always a risk, and one of the things to keep in mind, if you're sued because you're speaking out, the nature of that suit is almost certainly going to be defamation. Speaking evil falsities about us. And one of the realities of defamation litigation is that if what you're saying is true, you're going to win that suit. That's not to say that you're going to find it easy to find a lawyer who's going to get you off that hook, but you got to wrap your arms around yourself and bear the risk. If you feel that you've got to speak out, speak out. You are doing the Lord's work, whether this cult believes in the Lord or has no interest in the Lord. Speaking out is terribly important, and sometimes you can satisfy that itch to speak out, as I said earlier, just by forming a support group and speaking out to others who will be sympathetic to just letting you blow off steam and air your grievances. You don't have to necessarily speak out publicly, but find a way to get that pain off your chest. It can be very liberating.
Yeah, and to add to that, there have been many members, former members, who have spoken out and no repercussions. They've spoken out freely, and it's helped a lot of people. And the videos continue to. Kelsey originally posted her own handful of videos on her own channel. Jordan Young has posted multiple videos. There's others like Dory. I can't remember her last name, but another former member, has her own YouTube channel. She's posted multiple videos. So Michele seems to be somewhat of a unique case, fortunately. And that all happened, initially, that was over a decade ago, right, Michele? And so hopefully it would seem maybe that like Peter said, they have learned to think 2 or 3 times before taking legal action. I don't think it hopefully they're seeing that it's not serving them very well. And I'll just say that if they do, if they continue to take legal action against members, we'll continue to make it public and to let the world know how mind-boggling their behaviors are.
I would also like to add that there's a recurring theme with all the former members. We're all telling our stories, right? There's so many things that our stories have in common. Most of the WMS churches, generally speaking, are run the same way, and we've all had very similar experiences. So if how many people is it going to take that are all saying the same thing for the church to not be able to sue about it anymore? Like, can they file a lawsuit legally? Sure. Are they going to win? Probably not. There's just so much out there to support what most members are going to say about them anyway.
Yeah.
We've talked about almost everything, and like Peter said, as long as you're speaking the truth and it's your own opinion and from your own experiences, that's your right to do so.
And Jordan, can you post your email that people can contact if they want to speak out?
Yes.
Maybe have it as a pinned post or something when
I can
this
do
video
that.
is available for replay.
Okay. So Freethinker asked, legally, if someone says it's their experience or their opinion, then it shouldn't be defamation, right?
Simple answer to that question is yes, right. That's not to collapse the entire law of defamation into one simple little bundle. But if you're talking about a truth as you experienced it, and you are talking about your opinion in ways that make it clear that this is what you think based upon what you have experienced, then a defamation suit cannot succeed against you.
Good to know. All right. Well, this has been fun. I think we've covered a lot of good stuff. So Kelsey, unless you've seen any other comments or questions you wanna get to, we can wrap this up.
No, I don't. I do not think I saw any others. Just if you would like to speak out, just contact Jordan, and or if you just want. I see a lot of I see a lot of folks posting about they have loved ones in the group, and if you want someone to talk to about it or anything, contact Jordan.
And there's probably a way, Jordan, right? Like if somebody has family that they could tell their stories and perhaps you could disguise their voice or something. You know how they do those interviews on TV? There's probably a way around it if they want to.
Yeah. Right? There's definitely ways. Disguising the voice would be, we can do that. They might end up sounding like Darth Vader or something on their video, which I don't, you might see that as a pro or con.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's definitely possible. And I think I probably need to say that there's probably a lot of people hearing you, Kelsey, say, hey, if you want to share your story, just reach out to Jordan. And they're probably rolling their eyes saying, yeah, I've tried that. Because there's a lot of people who reach out to me wanting to share their stories. And, there's people I've said, hey, reach out to me in 2 months. I just, I've got 3 videos in the burner right now. And so I would love to increasingly have more time to do this. It'd be great to put out an interview a week. I don't have the time at the moment to do that. I appreciate those who are supporting the channel to allow me to have the time that I do have to do this. But more is needed. I think, I get a lot of emails. I have people backed up in emails who are kind of waiting in line to do an interview. And so you definitely, you can send me an email, and, you know, I can put you on the list. But yeah, I apologize to those of you who have reached out and wanted to share your story and you haven't been able to. Something with the new channel though, that I'm thinking about, and I'll just throw this out there, and you know, some people might like this idea, they might not, but I thought for those who just want to tell their story, they want to get it out there, and they want to do it soon. If you want to just sit down with your iPhone, record tell your story on your phone, and send that to me. If you don't want to go through the hassle of creating a channel or finding some place to post it, just send that to me. And I think one of the benefits of having a separate, WMS devoted channel is I would be happy to share those right there on the channel. And so, if you're somebody who wants to share your story and you don't maybe want to wait to be able to do an interview format with me, you are welcome to record the video yourself. Just tell your story. If you want to talk to me beforehand, I could send you maybe a list of questions that I would, be curious to have you answer, to kind of some talking points. If you want to just sit down and just start talking, do that. And again, I'd be happy to post those. And I think a lot of people would benefit. I think again, with this channel, I would like to get as much content out there as possible. The WMSCOG, just one of their ridiculous things that to pile up what they do. They're on YouTube. They're just posting as much content as they can, and I think it's my opinion. It would seem from my perspective, the way I see it, that they just want to drown out all the critics, and so they're just posting as much content as they possibly can, so that when you type in WMSCOG, you're not going to find the former members. You're going to find their propaganda, and so I would love to just to be able to match that with content that's helping to give people more accurate information and a more full picture of what this group is. So yeah, if you want to tell your story, feel free to record that yourself and send that to me, and I would be happy to post that.
And also, Michelle put in the chat, try contacting also Playing in Traffic podcast.
Yep.
They posted their email address. I posted it again. They're also a great resource too. So
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Peter, Kelsey, Michelle, thank you guys for doing this. Thank you everybody for watching. You guys are welcome if you have any last thoughts you want to share before we end this. Speak now or forever hold your peace.
Let me just say, at the risk of offending anyone, go with God, and God is not a South Korean woman.
So true. Yep, that is so true.
That's funny.
Well, thanks for having me. It was fun.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
And thank you, Peter and Michelle, for the hard work you guys are doing.
Yes.
That allow people like Jordan and I to speak out. So
yep. On the front lines for sure.
Thank you.
Take care, folks.
Take care.
Bye.
Have a good night.